All right, babies, I'm going on. So earlier we discussed in the previous video what strategy analysis actually is, and now we're going to analyze the current state. So it's the same format, right? What's the purpose? What's the description? What are the inputs? What are the elements? What are the tools we use? Who are the stakeholders? And basically the guidelines and tools, the techniques, what are the stakeholders, and the outputs that we get until we get to a different chapter. So these kind of flow behind each other, right? 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and all the good stuff. Now, here we go. Analyze current state. What's the purpose to analyze current state? Is to understand the reasons why an enterprise needs to change some aspects in how it operates and what would be directly or indirectly affected by the change. Energy and confidence. Come on. What's the description? The starting point of any change and understanding why the change is needed. Potential change is triggered by problems or opportunities that cannot be addressed without altering the current state. Business analysts work to help stakeholders enable a change by exploring and articulating the business needs that dive into the desired change. Without clearly understood business needs, it is impossible to develop a coherent strategy, and the resulting change initiative is most certain to be driven by a mix of conflicting stakeholder demands. So the starting point is they're telling us here is basically why the change is needed. So look at the need, potential change, and talk to the stakeholders, make sure they're actually like in tune with what you're doing, make sure that's what they want. Without clearly understood business needs, they mention here it's impossible to develop a coherent strategy. Because if the business needs are not understood and are not elaborated upon and confirmed and all that good stuff, we can't create a solution. Because any solution wouldn't necessarily work because we don't know what the need is. How lucky can we be? Change always occurs in the context of existing stakeholder processes, technology, and policies which constitute the current state of the enterprise and of the enterprise. So like there's always change happening, but kind of like we have to target it and we have to follow through. Business analysts examine the current state and in the context of the business need to understand what may influence proposed changes and what will be affected by them. So what we do is basically take the step back in order to like see where we are and what are the things that could actually work and what are the things that could influence it, and what are the effects of changes or anything that we touch, how can it affect the overall process that already exists. The current state is explored in just enough detail to validate the need for a change and or the change strategy. Understanding the current state of the enterprise prior to the change is necessary to identify what will need to change to achieve a desired future state and how the effect of change will be assessed. So yeah, man, it's just like understanding the current state is important because this is from where you start. And it's necessary to identify what will need to change to achieve the desired future state. All right. The scope of the current state describes the important existing characteristics of the environment. The boundaries of the current state scope are determined by the components of the enterprise and its environment and as they relate to their needs. So it's part of us here right now is I think through elicitation to actually get the components and the bits and pieces, the pieces of the actual environment or the pieces of the company that kind of like contribute to each other in order for the whole machine to kind of work. And for us like to kind of like set up the boundaries like mentally, right? And to see how they relate to the needs. It could be described on different levels, ranging from the entire enterprise to small components of a solution. Like creating a model of the current state might require collaboration throughout the outside of the enterprise. For small efforts, the scope might be only a small component of an enterprise. Like you could probably target departments depending on what you want, or you can target the whole thing, or maybe you can even hire somebody from the outside in order to kind of like give you an outlook, which kind of creates a more like if you were to hire a consultant in this case, what you're going to be asking them is like, how would a company like this actually function better? And they will just give you a path to compare to the current state, which allows you to move in a more uniformed way, I guess, or in a more kind of like coherent, understandable way. That way, any change you see or any deviation you see is kind of like what you interact with. The current state of an enterprise is rarely static while a change is being developed or implemented. As in, like we after while we're developing change, we can't expect things to stay the same because like there people are already moving and on a daily basis decisions are being made. So internal and external influencers as well as other organizational changes can affect the current state in ways that force alterations in the desired future state, change strategy or requirement design. So that's something that we have to keep an eye on, right? Because ultimately what we're doing is we're trying to bring an external change into something that's already moving. So we have to find a way in order for us to flow properly and whatever change we're designing. And that's why probably strategy works, because sometimes you kind of split the change into smaller pieces so that as the actual like organization is changing, it basically it doesn't put too much like strain on its movement. Like a big change might actually halt operations and have them move in a different direction, but small changes might actually like build on top of each other. And what are the inputs? Elicitation results we use to define to understand the current state. Elicitation results are basically us talking to stakeholders. Needs, the problem, the opportunity faced by an enterprise or organization often launches business analysis work to better understand these needs. And then we actually have like the diagram that we love so much. What are the inputs, needs, and elicitation results confirmed? It just hit me that like elicitation results unconfirmed as well, kind of like were placed as inputs, but they're not used here. So maybe they're used in like define future state or something like this. What are the tools and guidelines? Business analysis approach, enterprise limitation, organizational strategy, solution limitation, solution performance goals, solution performance measures, stakeholder analysis results. All you have to do is comment, send me the ebook, and I'll send it to you, man. This book. Because on chapter 10, I'm going to take a step back right now and I'm going to kind of like show you. This is chapter 10, and it's basically all the techniques. This is technique number 1. Backlog management is a technique described the same way, the same module, right? Balanced scorecard is a technique. All of these are techniques, right? Business capability analysis is a technique. Glossary is a technique where you kind of like outline stuff. Interviews, they describe all these techniques for us. So at any point in time, let me know. I'll actually send you the book so you'll actually have some reference points. But for now, we're browsing through these techniques and how they're important, and eventually we'll take the time to actually like read each one of them on itself and kind of like decide some things around on surrounding them and kind of like elaborate on our own vocabulary on how these techniques to how we would build these techniques and why we use them and why they're relevant and all that good stuff. Cool. Now we're back to the diagram. Task, analyze current state is basically that's the building process, right? This is what we're building. We're tasking and building the current state. What's the output? Current state description and business requirements. And current state description basically, look at that. The tasks using these outputs. The current state description literally goes back to chapter 3, where we're planning the stakeholder engagement, which shows you that the whole course of us business analyzing is kind of like looping into itself and connecting into itself, because everything we do at any point is susceptible to be used on any part of the actual like journey of analyzing stuff. We task that uses the current state description is can be used when you're planning stakeholder engagement, when you're planning business analysis governance, when you're defining future state, assessing risk, defining the change strategy, analyzing potential value and recommended solutions, assess enterprise limitation, recommend actions to increase solution value, and business requirements are used to define future states. What are the elements? One is business needs. Business needs are the problems and opportunities of strategic importance faced by enterprise. An issue encountered in the organization, such as a customer complaint, a loss of revenue, or a new market opportunity, usually triggers the evaluation of a business need. So sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive. Like sometimes it's like, okay, we want to grow into this, and that's a need that we need, that we're looking at in order for us to actually get there. And other times it's basically like something's wrong. We should have changed, adapted to something we don't know. So that brings a need. A business need may be identified at many different levels of the enterprise, from top down, a strategic goal that needs to be achieved, from bottom up, a problem with the current state of process, function, or system, from middle management, manager needs additional information to make sound decisions, must perform additional functions to meet business objectives, from external drivers, customer demand, or business competition in the marketplace. The definition of business needs is frequently the most critical step in any business analysis effort. A solution must satisfy the business needs to be considered successful. The way the need is defined, like, okay, so like these are very much like stating the obvious, right? The way the need is defined determines whether alternative solutions will be considered, okay, which stakeholder will be consulted, okay, which solution approaches will be evaluated, okay. Business needs are always expressed from the perspective of the enterprise, not that of any particular stakeholder. So business needs are always, they're not personal, right? That's basically what they're telling us at the end. Because like everything you're doing is basically to kind of like decide who are the elements engaged with it. Business needs are often identified or expressed along with the presumed solution. The business analyst should question the assumptions and constraints that are generally buried in the statement of the issue to ensure that the correct problem is being solved. So here, assumptions and constraints that are generally buried in the statement of the issue to ensure the business analyst should question the assumptions and constraints that are generally buried in the statement of the issue to ensure that correct problem is being solved in the widest possible range. So the business analyst always has to question the assumptions and the constraints that are generally buried in the statement of the issue. What does that mean? As in, like, whatever the issue is, there are a lot of factors that lead to it being an issue, and that's what a business analyst should always be questioning. What are the assumptions we made for this to be actually declared an issue, and what are the constraints that made it valid as an issue? So to ensure that the correct problem is being solved and the widest possible range of alternative solutions are considered. The idea behind this is why did water enter the room? Well, the the bigger problem is it was raining, right? But the idea of like the roof leaking is a more prominent one that we can actually target, while the problem of rain didn't actually come close, right? But maybe there are multiple things like, okay, the window was also open, but like rain that came from the roof is a lot more destructive and you can always close the window. So like actual change versus behavioral change or something like this. Why not? Let's consider things in different ways. A solution to set business needs must have the potential to generate benefits for the enterprise or its stakeholders. So a solution to set business needs, of course, any solution for the needs should generate benefits. It has to create value. It's one of the 6 core principles of business analysis. Or avoid losses that would otherwise occur. So basically, it could be a solution that saves money or it could be a solution that makes money. I don't know. Like value could be actually assessed differently. Like sometimes you don't want to lose money is a strong value for you. Maybe controlling costs, maybe assessing the risk of something in order for you to kind of like limit the something on it. But you're always getting something in return. If you're not, then hey man, uh, why the fuck are you doing it? Adverse impacts the problem is causing within the organization and quantity. You know what? I'm gonna stop there. For 7 years, I always did new stuff. And I always did new stuff with the actual concept of this is going to change something. But for 7 fucking years, I opened companies. I've closed 9 companies in my life, man. So far, other than the hypothetical ones that I wanted to start but never got off the ground. And this, I almost always never considered the value of return when it comes to why change has to happen. Because I always looked at it as something new, which means it's going to be attractive. And most of the time, it's because I was more prone to try something new completely out of the context of where I am, instead of actually solving the current issues that are making me not make money or lose money. So I operated restaurants, I operated a catering service, I operated even like I invested in a garage at one point and like manufacturing and production and farming. I had a farm at one point. And almost always, I never considered how my actions are going to be basically creating value. I was just looking at the end result without the steps to get there. I just wanted to mention it because here, a solution to a set of business needs must have the potential to generate benefits. I really think most of the time we overlook this simply because I don't know if it is we get involved or is the fact that we just kind of like assume a lot more stuff that are on the surface shiny, but the minute you hold them, kind of like show you the whole pattern that would remove the shine from them. Yeah. Factors that business analysts may consider include adverse impacts the problem is causing within the organization and quantify those impacts. For example, potential lost revenue, inefficiencies, dissatisfied customers, low employee morale. Expected benefits from we are considering these in order to analyze the current state. So we're looking at the current state and we're looking to see what's being affected. So in order for us to actually like create a strategy around it. Expected benefits from any potential solution, for example, increased revenue, reduced cost, increased market share. How quickly the problem could potentially be resolved or an opportunity could be taken, and the cost of doing nothing basically also needs to be considered. And the underlying source of the problem is the main thing we need to be looking at, right? Like, where did this, where the any problem, where did it come from? We can solve it, but where did it come from? So business needs will drive the overall analysis of the current state, although it's necessary to fully detail all aspects of the current state before further developing the change strategy. This exploration will often uncover deeper underlying causes of the problem. So here, business needs will drive the overall analysis of the current state. We completely have to understand that the only reason we have a job is because there's a need that we need to fulfill, right? And that's where the six core concepts come. Like, who are the people involved in this need? What are the possible solutions? What value do we get from actually approaching this need? Like, if there's a high chance there won't be any value from approaching. Like, we need to do this for some fucking reason, but competitively, it doesn't work with our social culture, for example. Or like, I have no idea, man. I'm thinking about like a company in the States actually succeeding doing one thing, which not which made us see something that we're doing, for example, in the Middle East, that's probably like required for success. But that requirement doesn't fit to the culture that we're actually like involved in, like the Middle Eastern culture or the Arab culture or whatever. So all of that are kind of like relevant because like business needs drive the analysis, but to detail the aspect of the current state before further developing the change strategy, this exploration will often uncover deeper underlying causes. So, like, we have to go back and forth between the different facets of it, of like, how are we actually strategizing and for what reason? It actually brings the need to look differently to us and maybe even like kind of change it because like okay, when the more you understand about something, the kind of more you understand about why it became a thing and what maybe is a closer need or a better need to look at or. This exploration will often uncover deeper underlying causes of the problem and the opportunity that triggered the investigation, which then becomes additional business needs. Number two, organizational structure and culture. Look at that. Look at that. I just talked about it. Organizational structure defines the formal relationships between people working in the enterprise, while communicating channels and relationships are not limited to that structure. They are heavily influenced by it, of course, and the reporting structure may aid or limit a potential change. It's the point of a need if we can't actually get the departments to kind of like get together to get it done. Organizational culture is the beliefs, values, and norms shared by the members of an organization. These beliefs drive the actions taken by an organization. Business analysts perform a cultural assessment to identify if cultural changes are required to better achieve the goals. Amazing. Identify whether stakeholders understand the rationale for the current state of the enterprise and value delivered by it, of course. Ascertain whether the stakeholders' view of the current state is satisfactory or if change is needed. I'm going to read it again because I said, of course, three of them because they made sense. But now, consciously, I'm going to go through them slowly. Identify if cultural changes are required to better achieve the goals. Yes, so when we're actually talking about cultural changes, we're diving deeper into how maybe sometimes we don't have to change the operations. Like the true investment, maybe for the need to be fulfilled, is just the way we actually interact with each other. Maybe it creates more harmony, or maybe it's just a logistical issue where people kind of like engage with themselves differently. Or maybe on the other side, it's more like on the other side of this pattern might be like, we could actually like just invest more money in better machinery, right? Identify whether stakeholders understand the rationale for current state or the enterprise that the value delivered by it. Uh, So when it comes to the stakeholders, that's where the communication comes in, right? So we have to actually be able to tell if the actual stakeholders understood what the fuck we're doing and the reason why we're doing it and how it actually delivers value to them. And ascertain whether stakeholders view the current state as satisfactory or if change is needed. Like, sometimes we be looking at something and think, yes, this can change for the better, but people are perfectly fine with it. So then you wouldn't want to reach resistance. You might want to do something that makes them want to change it, or. You never know. Three, capabilities and processes. The capabilities and processes describe the activities an enterprise performs. Remember, what we're doing right now is we're discussing how to, the elements that are needed to analyze current states, the current state. So the element number one is what the business needs. Element number two is the organizational structure and culture. And element number three is capabilities and processes. Capabilities and processes describe the activities an enterprise performs. They also include the knowledge the enterprise has, the products and services it provides, the functions it supports, and the methods it uses to make decisions. Of course, right? That's basically how the documentation of how the actual company does things. Core capabilities or processes describe the essential functions and enterprise that differentiate it from others. They are measured by performance indicators that can be used to assess the benefits of change. Business analysts may use a capability-centric view of the enterprise when looking for innovative solutions that combine existing capabilities to produce a new outcome. A capability-based view and use is useful in the situation because capabilities are generally organized in a functional hierarchy with relationships to other capabilities, making it easier to identify any gaps. So a capability-centric view is one of those, the same way you're actually looking at stakeholders and you're kind of like giving them certain personas. What you're doing is you're kind of having a potential. Okay, so like you're kind of creating a mind map that allows you to look at what are the capabilities of the people or what are the capabilities of the departments and what could they potentially do in order for you to be able to understand the processes, to understand the rhythm of the processes. I'm really using rhythm because in guitar, like all of us can play a chord, but the way we play the chord is what music is about, right? So a capability-centric view is basically how people are capable. And it's funny because you have a lot of people that are able to kind of like, there are some tasks that you can do in a more flow state. It's easy for you to kind of bring out. While on the other side, you might look at something and you realize that you're a bit awkward about it, right? And some things you're more process oriented, while on the other side, you feel yourself, you're more like intuitively oriented. Some people are really good, tell me what to do from A to Z and I can do it. Some people just tell me what you want done and I can do it. So one is capability, I guess, and one is process. So here, so to identify any gaps, and these are the gaps that basically people will end up filling in order for the solution to make sense and in order to kind of like have change so that the need is manifested. Is not the solution, the need is accomplished, is reached. It's no longer eligible to be considered a need because we did it. And then we have to look, we can look at something else. A process-centric view, that's why they mentioned gaps, and amazing. A process-centric view of the enterprise when looking for ways to improve the performance of current activities. So a process-centric view is basically you're looking at the processes and how they do things. A process-based view is used in the situation because processes are organized in an end-to-end fashion across the enterprise to deliver value. And the best example I can use for that is basically how Henry Ford basically sped the actual delivery process of a car by allocating people to do one thing as the car moves. So one person puts the actual like doors together, one person puts the wheels, and as the car moves, they put the doors, and as the car moves, they put the wheels. And by doing that, he kind of sped the process, and that's a process-centered view. And ultimately, everyone has processes in how they do things, but sometimes kind of like you can actually like you can highlight them, you can look at them differently, you can like teach new skills that allow the process to move forward, or you can standardize them even, like you never know. Across the enterprise to deliver value to its customers, making it easier to ensure that change does in fact increase performance. Number four is technology and infrastructure. You have to kind of like see the current state of technology and infrastructure, information systems used by the enterprise to support people in executing processes. Sometimes the change you need is just a different software and like a week of training. Uh, Whoever actually does this might actually, whoever works in teams might see the difference between like old technology that have been like basically built upon with a fuck ton of technical debt and new technologies that do the exact same thing as old technologies. It's just built in a different way that allows things to be smoother and easier and more friendly to interact with. For people in executing processes, making decisions, and interacting with suppliers and customers, the infrastructure describes the enterprise environment with respect to physical components and capabilities. The infrastructure can include components such as computer hardware, physical plants, and logistics, as well as their operation and upkeep. Amazing. Policies. Policies define the scope of decision making at different levels of an enterprise. They generally address, again, like checking policies in order to see how things work. They generally address routine operations rather than strategic change. Um, I think policy, yeah, they ensure that the decisions are made correctly, provide guidance to staff on permitted and appropriate behaviors and actions, support governance, and determine when and how resources can be acquired. Identification of relevant policies may shape the scope of the solution space and make it straight on the types of action that can be pursued. Some policies may actually be considered for changing, while other policies may actually be a hurdle for us to change. Because if you want to change something that interferes with the company policy, then you have to talk to the people that actually that are involved, maybe even like reach the stakeholders, which are the board of directors. Because some policies change, some change in policies might add more risk, maybe, or but like so the way I'm thinking about it is policies are placed in order for us to kind of have some reference and the better ways in order to approach them. So sometimes you have to, always you have to look at the policies to see that you're not going across the board. But sometimes these policies kind of show that they're the hindrance. For example, maybe a policy that means like most bureaucratic companies have policies that require 3, 4 times a checkup before something actually pushes through. I was reading an article earlier on like LinkedIn. Uh, a guy, after interviewing like 15 people, basically got to a candidate that they liked. But the process of her being approved was based on the company policy. Like this stakeholder has to approve, this stakeholder has to approve, this stakeholder has to approve. Within the process, basically, they lost the person. Like once they actually messaged her, like you got the job, she was like, I already got one, man. I signed with somebody. Go fuck yourself. And what happened was they lost in a resource, and that also could that because of the policies they did. And so what he did is he reorganized the entire thing where like one person meets her and the department head, and the department head has to like HR does not actually is not really included in it. It's she's HR is at the end result when she gets the job. I fucking love it. Why? Because the person who is actually in charge of the entire company culture or like the leader of that department is the first person that meets her, and then she works without whatever, man. It's just my own train of thought for my own company. Anyways, sometimes policies could be detrimental. Sometimes policies need to be like considered, as in like we can't do this because of the policies. And sometimes you have to go look and be like, what if we change the policies? Maybe that would actually allow us a better aspect of change. Business architecture, not a part of current state, should be assessed in a complete isolation from the rest. No part of the current state should be assessed in complete isolation from the rest. Business analysts must understand how all these elements of the current state fit together and support the one another only to recommend changes that will be effective. Business architecture and how the actual departments engage with each other. The existence of business architecture typically meets an assortment of businesses and stakeholder needs. If those needs are not recognized or not continue to be met by a proposed transition or future state, changes are likely to result in a loss of value. So ultimately, we have to understand that everything we're doing anywhere is connected to something else. Like the way we're tracing requirements, the same way we're tracing behavior, the same way we're tracing our analysis of the current state. Because if we change something in a department that ends up fucking with a different department without our knowledge, that means we didn't really understand anything. And that probably goes to when the stakeholders are being involved, because now you understand there's a lot more information from stakeholders other than the fact that, hey man, where are you on this project? Internal assets. Business analysts identify enterprise assets used in the current state. Resources can be tangible or intangible, such as financial resources, patents, reputations, and brand names. External influences. Influencers. There are external influencers to the enterprise that do not participate in change, but might present constraints, dependencies, and drivers of current state, naturally. Industry structure, competition, customers, suppliers, political and regulatory environment, technology, and macroeconomic factors. All of these are basically different parts of the field that we're working in. Because if we're working in an industry, it's contributing to the economy. So what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the industry, what's happening, how the industry is structured, like are we creating something new? Are we deviating from the current structure? Uh, is this change going to be, is going to impact us externally? Would we need to like logistically change shit when it comes to deliveries or something? Competitors, the nature and intensity of competition between enterprises within an industry can be significant. The entry to a new competitor may also change the nature of the industry to increase competition. Customers, the size and nature of existing and potential customers. Like if you're working with customers that are like 1 million people that pay $5 versus if you're working with like 1,000 people that pay $100,000. There's a lot of like different ways to weigh how you interact with like customers. But here, like such as negotiating power, degree of price sensitivity, alternatively, the emergence of the new alternative ways that customers can meet their needs may drive the enterprise to deliver greater value. Maybe you can make the actual if you do it better, like maybe you can actually like reduce the price, but they pay for like delivery, but delivery is faster, so customers are more than willing to kind of like split that or something like this. I have no idea. Suppliers, the variety and diversity of suppliers might be an influencer, as can the power of suppliers have over their customers. If you're buying shit from someone, that could also impact political and regulatory environment. Like we're in Lebanon right now, right? Like everything you do is kind of like fucked up. But if you go to Dubai, everything is fucking regulated as fuck. So like yeah, you have to have like lawyers understand what the fuck is going on. It's just a shit show. Technology, the productivity enhancing potential of recent and expected technological innovations might influence the need naturally. Macroeconomic factors, the constraints and opportunities that exist within the existing and unexpected macroeconomic environment. Macroeconomic is on a much bigger scale. Sample, trade, unemployment, or inflation might influence the need, right? Some of these sources might use different terminology based on whether an enterprise is for-profit corporation or non-profit enterprise or a government agency. For example, a country does not have customers, it has citizens. That's intense, because citizens are assets, while customers are consumers. Remember that. I'm actually going to highlight this. And what color are we going to give it? Pink. Why did it give me yellow? Fuck you, yellow. I want pink. Done. Right. Holy shit, if I'm not mistaken, it's mixing pink and yellow. Whatever. Guidelines and tools, business analysis approach. Guides how the business analyst undertakes an analysis of the actual current state. Enterprise limitation used to understand the challenges that exist within the enterprise. Organizational strategy, an organization will have a set goal and objectives which guides operations, establishes direction, and provides a vision for a future state. This can be implicitly or explicitly stated. Solution limitation. Organizational strategy is something that you do basically, right? Or will have you basically take what the organization has and you build something around it. Solution limitation used to understand the current state and challenges of existing solutions. Solution performance goals measure the current performance and enterprise of solution and serve as the baseline for setting future state goals and measuring improvements. Solution performance measures describe an actual performance of existing solutions. Stakeholder analysis results. Stakeholders from across the organization will contribute to an understanding and analysis of the current state. Of course they would. What are the techniques? Benchmarking and market analysis provides an understanding of where are the opportunities for improvement in the current state. Specific frameworks may be useful. Past Steep, CATWO, and others. SWOT analysis and all that good stuff. Business capability analysis identifies gaps and prioritizes them in relation to value and risk. Business model canvas provides an understanding of the value position of the enterprise satisfies for its customers. Business cases used to capture information regarding the business needs and opportunity. I did not want to actually continue with this because this is basically you create the model, right? The critical factors in delivering that value and the resulting provides an understanding of the value proposition that the enterprise satisfies for its customers. So like we're creating there. I'm reading it for you. The business model canvas is basically the purpose. The business model canvas describes how enterprise creates, delivers, and captures value. And what we do is we kind of like is comprised of 9 building blocks that describe how an organization intends to deliver value. So I'm glad I went back to it because I was like, oh, we're gonna get back to it later, but now that's a sneak peek. So the canvas is basically what are the key partnerships, key activities, key resources, value proposition, customer relationships, channel, customer segments, cost structure, and revenue streams. It's practically a mood board. Google that of a شو اسمه. And this is basically how it looks like. Oh, that's more of a business model. Yeah, it is a business model. So it's the value proposition, the customer relationships, channels, key activities, resources, cost structure, revenue streams. You can actually Google a business model. Every enterprise should have one officially like this or something close to it in order for them to always keep to understand like which part of the movement of the which combination is where they're actually like having issues. Great. Business cases used to capture information, concept modeling used to capture key terms and concept the business domain to refer to relationships between them. Data mining used to obtain information on the performance of the enterprise. Document analysis analyzes any existing documentation about the current state, including but not limited to documents created during the implementation of a solution. Training manuals, issue reports, competitor information, supplier agreements. Financial analysis, focus groups, functional decomposition, breaks down complex systems or relationships in current state. Interviews, item tracking, tracks the manages issues discovering about the current state. Lessons learned enable the assessment of failures and opportunities, metrics and KPIs, key performance indicators, assess performance of the current state of an enterprise. Mind mapping used to exploit relevant aspects of the current state and better understand relevant factor affecting the business need. Observation, okay, so mind mapping is mind mapping, right? But like for some reason I kind of tripped on it. Explore relevant aspects of the current state and better understand relevant factors. So mind mapping is kind of like creating your own model of what the current state is looking like and who interacts with who and what and where in order for you to kind of like see where like hinges could exist. Observation may provide opportunities for insights into needs within the current state of that have not yet been identified previously by a stakeholder. Organizational modeling, process analysis, process modeling, risk analysis and management, root cause analysis, scope modeling, survey or questionnaire, SWOT analysis, vendor assessment, workshop. Vendor assessment determines whether any vendors that are part of the current state are adequately meeting commitments or any changes needed. And the stakeholders basically, and workshops at the end of the day. Like all of these we're familiar with and are the ones that we're going to be interacting with. Like I said, like these, we're going to explore in more detail in chapter 10. Stakeholders, the customers are a stakeholder, domain subject matter expert is a stakeholder, end user is a stakeholder, implementation subject matter expert, a tester as well as a stakeholder, operational support directly involved in supporting the operations because we're looking at the current state and we're kind of like creating the mental mind map of how everything works in order for us to create a strategy. The project manager and a regulator, a sponsor, a supplier, all of them. And what are the outputs? The current state description in the context of the enterprise scope, capabilities, resources, performance, culture, dependencies, infrastructure, external influences, and significant relationships between these elements. How do we express them without writing full on papers? I don't know, but it seems like most of this work needs to be translated into what? Something visual. And business requirements is one of the outputs as well. The problem, opportunity, the constraints, the which defined. So like current state description is literally everything we mentioned earlier. The context of the enterprise scope, capabilities, the resources, the performance, the culture, the dependencies, the infrastructure, the external influences, the significant relationships between these elements. And business requirements, the problem, opportunity, or constraint, which is defined based on the understanding of the current states. Amazing. Defining future states is basically 6.2. Yay, we finished. Finally, man. This one took a while. Fuck, man. All right, see you guys in a bit.